Hi, hey, hello. While putting the finishing touches on my previous video, I was looking for a sound effect to play at the beginning of that video. I later decided to hold on to a few things and place them in this video instead. One of those things was that sound effect, the sound effect that you're hearing right now. It comes from the May 2000 North American release of Digimon World for the PlayStation game console. Despite having started this game tens of times, until recently I had never completed this video game. Now, I have long since killed any notion of a video game backlog. I spent all of 2020 with my best friend Nelma comfortably resting in my lap, beating every single Yakuza game, a task that stretched into February of 2021. Once you have played all of Yakuza, you're indelibly left with the impression that you have experienced a little bit of every video game that's ever been made. This notion forever impressed upon you. The keeping of any sort of backlog just feels a little perfunctory. However, I found myself with the inability to do much of anything for the month of December. And with that sound effect mulling over in my head, I decided to fire up the Mister and play Digimon World for a while. A while became a day became 2 weeks off and on, and finally I had completed the game. But why was I even thinking about that sound effect in the first place? I was thinking about it because I was trying to think about a way to start talking about how my best friend Nelma died. My first encounter with Digimon was in 1997. My mom got my brother and I each a Digimon pet, and we were immediately hooked. This device was pitched as a Tamagotchi for boys because simply raising a creature and giving it a good life without subjecting it to dogfighting is apparently too woke. But all the same, it was effective in its goal of getting me to take care of it, and I did love that little doohickey and the creature inside. Until I figured out how to turn the sound off, I was regularly getting it taken away from me in class. The mechanics of this device are relatively simple. You have a creature that hatches from an egg, you feed it, you clean up after it, you train it, and you subject it to a life of pit fighting. Based on how much you engage with any one of these particular mechanics, your Digimon can branch out into a broader selection of creatures to reflect your gameplay choices. This device did receive much praise from schoolyard children and money-hungry executives the world over. However, time passed in the marketing world, and the game that created all of these variants on monster taming, Dragon Quest V, sired a new child and sent it to the West. That child's name was Pokémon. Pokémon elevated its predecessors in the marketplace and spawned many of its own children before summarily cutting all of their heads off and dominating the collectible monster gaming space. Some of them still headlessly linger to this day, but in the case of Digimon, being that it was early to market and possessing a slightly different motif than Pokémon, was able to make it out of the 90s with a devoted fan base. The franchise started off the new decade with the release of Digimon World for the sunsetting PlayStation 1. This was an interesting time to be releasing games for the PlayStation 1, because the PlayStation 2 was on the horizon, and seemingly everyone was primed to be playing video games in 128-bit glory. But the PlayStation 2 was uniquely positioned to allow for a transferring audience for a few reasons. The PlayStation 2 was, in most places, the cheapest DVD player you could buy, meaning that in nearly every home, there was at least one console somewhere on the premises. Important to our discussion, the console was backwards compatible. I have to imagine that some combination of ease of development, CDs being at their cheapest, and the fact that there were now two potential chances to catch someone with a console in their home that could play it, Digimon World's 1.3 million copies sold must have looked good on someone's spreadsheet, because they made 2 more of them. While each of the titles operates in a different subcategory of JRPG, the first one, interestingly, attempts to expand upon the concepts presented in its keychain counterpart. Allow me a moment to explain. Your Digimon's training has now been expanded into a variety of stats classic of any JRPG that can offer you an idea of what it could change into, while still offering up some mystery in that none of this information is given to you up front, just like the keychain. Feeding and cleaning up after it are still present, however, these concepts have been expanded upon as well. In this game, you're afforded 3 pieces of meat a day from the meat garden. The game offers no real explanation as to why meat grows from the earth in this universe, but I guess that means that every Digimon is technically vegan? I don't know. Anyway, early on, these 3 pieces of meat will keep your Digimon well fed throughout the day. Once your Digimon grows, though, so too does its appetite. Thus, you are forced to venture outside the boundaries of your tiny town. Here you will be able to forage for food and items that will both expand your abilities to travel further, or if unneeded, can be sold later for more food. This exploration also puts you in direct interaction with other Digimon, most of which seemingly want to turn you into paste and consume you. Perhaps I was wrong about the vegan thing. Some of these Digimon, usually after combat, will ask to join your village. To explain, sometime before this game's beginning, the Digimon had a sort of fall of the Tower of Babel situation that scattered the Digimon all across the island, and they slowly stopped being able to communicate with one another. The plot of this game revolves around you bringing Digimon back to your town and trying to figure out the source of what separated them. The final barrier keeping you from resolving this problem is finding a toilet. Yes, your other major barrier in this game early on is trying to find a place to take a dump. Among your Digimon's other stats and meters, they also possess a cleanliness meter. This meter exclusively measures how dutifully you maintain your Digimon's bathroom breaks in appropriate locations. At the beginning of the game, there's a toilet directly next to your Digimon's training area. As your ability to travel further away from home expands, bathrooms become increasingly sparse, forcing you to either travel back several pre-rendered locations to use the toilet, or to purchase porta-potties, which your Digimon eats? Essentially, the need to poop places restrictions on either your in-game time or your in-game money. However, you absolutely can, and in some cases, either accidentally or intentionally, will have your Digimon take a dump in a random location. This action constitutes a training error. Both training your Digimon correctly and incorrectly create ripples in its genetic fabric, allowing it to evolve into a variety of different species based on your training decisions. All of these interlocking systems seek to replicate and expand upon the very basic experience of raising a Digimon on a keychain. So I fired up the Mister and began playing Digimon World. I made my way through the Digimon World's equivalent of the Myers-Briggs test, and I got my tiny buddy, an Agumon. I thoughtlessly typed in the name Nelma, and we proceeded on our adventure together. We encounter Shin Nelma in the form of an opposing Agumon right outside the training area, and after a short fight, he offers to join the city and opens up an item storage bank. You see, every time you beat a Digimon that then asks to join the city, they contribute something back to the community. For example, a short while later, I find Palmon, and once she joins the city, she upgrades the meat garden to allow for larger portions of food. These upgraded pieces of meat might fill up a Digimon with a larger appetite. Another example is finding Kunomon. Kunomon chews up a path of bramble, allowing you to reach another side of the island faster. There is a day-night cycle that exists in this game, so managing your travel time is important. After recruiting a few more Digimon for my town, I went back to training. My goal was to have my Digimon evolve into a Greymon. But based on the decisions I made, my Agumon evolved into a Centaurmon. Possessing a stronger Digimon, I chose to continue questing. Thanks to Kunomon, I can make my way to the beach and battle a Colomon. I threaten to throw Colomon on the grill, and he decides to join the city instead. Colomon opens up an item shop that I can buy healing items from and additional food. Each recruit in some way expands upon the overall experience, making the overall gameplay a little easier and allowing you to travel a little further. Digimon World is essentially a bodybuilding simulator, where you go into the gym for half of your life. You come out of the gym as a horse with a gun on your arm, and after a show of force, you gain the respect of your contemporaries and they join your commune. A short time after Colemon joined my city, he informed me that a bridge had opened up, allowing me to travel to the other side of the island. This part of the island has some unique properties to it. On one end of this area, time moves 2x slower. If you have the supplies, you can sit in this area for hours, duking it out with other Digimon and getting jacked as heck. The other part of this area, time moves 2x faster, and there's basically no reason to spend much time here beyond completing storyline components. I spent too much time here. Shortly after leaving this area, my Digimon collapses into a pile of polygons. I look at the words on the screen. It seems Nelma has faded away. What was I talking about again? Oh yeah, I was telling you about Nelma. My first encounter with Nelma was on August 4th, 2018 at the Forsyth County Humane Society in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. I had just recently moved into a new apartment, which officially marked the first time I lived alone in a new area other than my home state. Being alone in this scenario, I considered a few options for my first pet. A rabbit, an English bulldog, restarting my Digimon, but in truth, I needed a pet that would be comfortable spending a little time alone each weekday. I worked as a graphic designer one city over in Greensboro, and as such, I would not be able to return home on lunch breaks to tend to a pet. I grew up with cats and I loved them dearly, so with all of that in consideration, a cat it was. While perusing the Humane Society, there were a few cats that struck me, but one came to the glass and seemed to be observing me specifically, and I inquired about her. They got her out for me and she walked up to me. She settled in my lap for a moment, and then a crash would happen somewhere in the facility or a dog would bark and she would dart off under a table for safety. But after a moment, she would come back, presuming a degree of safety, and continued examining my face and hands. I moved only as she would allow me to ensure her safety, and by the end of our interaction, I knew that this was the friend for me. We went to the pet store to pick out a bed, she never used it, some toys, food, and a scratch post, litter boxes and litter, catnip and treats. She was nervous the entire time, and I felt this sense of urgency in getting her home as quickly as possible. I was struck by this intense level of nervousness and fear about the responsibility that I had just taken on. I know this is extremely pet owner behavior, but I felt like a parent who was suddenly dealing with the realization that there was another life that they were responsible for. And I mean, that's not entirely untrue. This, at the time, nameless cat's life did rely on my ability to not screw it up. Anyway, we got home and I allowed her the opportunity to explore the space. I showed her where the food was, where the bathrooms were. I observed her behavior and we began the process of considering a name. It should shock no one that while I have worked a wide variety of jobs in my life, my career as an adult has largely been in graphic design and the adjacent. As such, I looked to typefaces for inspiration. I wrote down on the back of an envelope the names of a few typefaces as I observed her behavior. I watched her trace, double trace, and triple trace an area of the room. I looked at the elegant blend of colors in her fur. I began to think of older typefaces, and typefaces inspired by older typefaces. There was a sort of broad trend between the 1950s and 1970s of layering filigree into type. You'd have these gestures along the circumference of a character, adding a bit of flair, and then laid into the type a second instance of filigree, a sort of textural amplification of the outer layer of filigree. A particular typeface bubbled to the surface as I observed her persistent re-curiosity of objects in the room and the texture of her fur. The name of this typeface was Nelma, and that became her name. What was I talking about again? Oh, I was talking about raising a Digimon. My dearly departed Digimon sat a pile of broken polygons, and I was asked to consider what new shape it would take when those polygons reformed into an egg. This is also where I found out the game genders your Digimon as male.
Pronouns, gender ambiguity, current day California, because that's all we know.
Anyway, we're recognizing that headcanon is canon, and that Nelma the Digimon is female. At this point, I consider the fact that I can realistically beat this game whenever I want. I've been able to beat this game my whole life, so I might as well choose to do so now. So other than managing the time of my tiny creature, what am I here to do? I decided to set some goals for myself. The first of which was to recruit Ogremon. Ogremon appears at several points in the game and operates as a sort of mid-boss. I wasn't even sure he was actually recruitable as a child, and after finding out he was, I had already bounced off the game. The second goal was a sort of two-tiered goal. Play the game normally, experiencing as many different kinds of Digimon as possible, and at some point, try to get a Metal Greymon. Again, how you raise your Digimon dictates how it evolves over time. Training a Digimon in a specific stat and feeding it a certain diet might have it evolve one way, while perhaps training it in a different stat and allowing for some mistakes can have it evolve in another. Something I sincerely enjoy about this game is that mistakes are a little bit of a misnomer. The game refers to them as mistakes, but realistically, they're just the experiences of your digital beast. They stay with your Digimon, and at some point those collective experiences lead to an evolution. So I decided, let's see how many experiences I can have on the road to Metal Greymon. For those unfamiliar, Metal Greymon is the Digimon on the cover of the game. It's an evolutionary possibility from the series' mascot, Agumon, and suggests itself the best Digimon. I'd seen my friends get this Digimon several times, but I'd never done it for myself. I always ended up getting this ultimate stage Digimon named Vetamon. It's like a weird alien with an exposed brain. I actually love its design now, but the fact that I was never able to get one of the cool dragon Digimon did frustrate me as a child. So with some goals set, I selected an egg, and Nelma and I traveled forth once again. After a few minutes of training in my time, not hers, she evolves into a Betamon. I happen to know from my experience with the old Digimon keychain pet that Betamon has the potential to evolve into Seadramon. So I decide to aim for that. And after a few days of training, she evolves into a Colamon. I must have made a mistake somewhere in her training, but we went with it anyway. Since I had a champion level monster now, I decided to travel out and look for more recruits for the city. I spent some time playing Capitalism Simulator with Monochromon, and I have to be honest, I completely forgot how to recruit this Digimon. I used to know, I've forgotten. There's a Birdramon in the area that I also tried to recruit. However, Birdramon sought to recruit me to the emergency room, and she was successful. After my defeat, I spent a little more time training, and one evening I was challenged by Greymon outside of Gigimon's home. After the scrap, Greymon joined the city, opening up an arena. I also happen to know that Greymon challenging you to a fight means that your city's prosperity score is at least 15, which means the city is progressing along nicely. This prosperity score acts as a sort of benchmark for where you are in the game, and at a certain point, Mount Infinity will unlock for you. Mount Infinity is the final area of the game. I spent a little bit more time training, and then, a few minutes later, Nelma faded away again. Her polygons reformed, and this time I chose the orange-striped egg. The Digimon that hatched from it was Poyomon, which evolved into Tokomon and then into Patamon. I knew from the anime that Patamon can evolve into Angemon, and since we're already participating in settler colonial behavior, we might as well proselytize all of File Island and look like Griffith while doing it. So I aimed for Angemon, and I actually got it. Acting as a hired assassin to avenge her past self, I took Nelma back to the bird's nest, and together we John Wicked that Birdramon into the dirt.
People keep asking if I'm back. Yeah, I'm thinking I'm back!
We caught a ride with her back to the city, and afterwards she asked to join us. After this recruitment, we immediately went back to the gym. I was determined to get this goober completely yoked and steamroll as much of this game as I could. Turns out I trained it a little too good, and I turned my Angemon into a literal machine, in the form of an Andromon. This is fantastic for a number of reasons. First, upon this evolution, you get a substantial stat boost, which will obviously help us fight other Digimon and then recruit them. Also, importantly, I know that this is the last stage of evolution for a Digimon in this game, so I know I have Andromon for a set amount of time as long as I maintain good care of her. I spent this time productively recruiting as many Digimon back to the city as I could. Also, I triggered the first fight with Ogremon. I throw hunks of metal at him until he's so filled with broken PC parts, it wouldn't be unreasonable to mistake him for the return address inbox of Newegg.com. After his defeat, he and his Agumon cronies scamper away. A few minutes later, Nelma faded away again. Her polygons reform, and this time I chose the Yoshi egg, knowing that it will give me a Botamon, which evolves into Koromon, and with the appropriate training, an Agumon, another chance at Greymon and Metal Greymon. But I made a mistake, and it evolved into a Tyrannomon. Hilariously, I actually forgot to save. I retrained Agumon, and I still got a Tyrannomon. But Tyrannomon is a good Digimon, and has access to several moves I've already learned previously, so whatever, we bowl. I decide to make the most out of this particular run, and hunt down Ogremon as many times as I can. I find him in Asmongold's streaming room, and I put he and his Agumon goons down next to the roaches. Then I find him banished in an underwater cave and fight him alongside a Waru Seadramon and a Gabumon. This fight is incredibly unbalanced, and it's only made easier by the fact that the game makes no particular attempts at structuring combat towards the types of encounters it puts you in. So enemy Digimon absolutely can and do hit their own partners with moves intended for Nelma. We will take any advantage the game will give us, and eventually we get the dub. The fourth and final encounter with Ogremon begins as a reflection of the first encounter, pairing him with a couple of Agumon. In the exact same fashion as the first, Nelma and I clobber Ogremon and his goons in short order. After the battle, Ogremon expresses concern about the potentiality of not being forgiven for all the harm he's caused, a concept perhaps we'll explore in a future YouTube video. Anyway, his concerns are dismissed, he joins the city, and he becomes a cop. He provides absolutely no gameplay or narrative function for the rest of the game, and is ostensibly useless. Just like real cops. Didn't I already make a video about this? Anyway, a few minutes later, Nelma faded away again. I pick an egg at random, and Nelma's polygons reform again. This time it doesn't really matter. I remember a friend telling me that if you have an in-training stage Digimon sleep under the tree you recruit Kunomon under, there's a chance it immediately evolves into a Kunomon. And it worked! I did this because this same friend also informed me of an island exclusively inhabited by beetle Digimon. And if you also have a beetle Digimon, you can compete in an exclusive beetle tournament. After a fishing bout that rivals every boss fight in this video game in terms of difficulty, we're provided with an opportunity to talk to Seadramon and convince them to take us to Beetle Island. After making it to the island, I'm informed that the island is between tournaments. Having no idea when the next one starts, I decide to set up camp and try to train until I get a Hercules Kabuterimon. Somewhere along the way, I make a mistake, and a few minutes later, Nelma faded away again. I pick the only egg I haven't picked yet in this playthrough, and I get a Euramon. It evolves into a Tanamon, and promptly poops on the ground. I decide to let her keep doing it, and eventually she evolves into a Sukamon, a literal pile of poop. During this process, she acquires a dog-like interest in eating poop, which does afford us the luxury of a cleaned-up training facility. A few minutes later, Nelma faded away again. I decide to pick the egg that gives me a Botamon again, aiming for a Greymon and eventually a Metal Greymon. Things start off well enough when she evolves into an Agumon, and after a couple of days of training, she evolves again, and I get a Greymon! Realizing the statistical requirements for a Metal Greymon must be high, Nelma and I hit the gym. Eventually, Nelma reached Ronnie Coleman status, and after filling her to the point of bursting with protein, she evolved again, this time into a Metal Greymon. Finally, we'd done it. We had unlocked the Digimon that had always evaded me. The dream had been achieved. I considered what was left to do in the game, and while there were a few areas left unexplored, I decided to instead clear out the remaining steps to unlock Mount Infinity and make my way to the end of this game. We absolutely pulverized every single remnant of villainy on that mountain. We fought Shin Nelma again in a triumphant rematch, this time in the form of an enemy Metal Greymon. What this Metal Greymon doesn't know is that my Metal Greymon is a genetic freak. She ain't normal. Nelma has a 141 2/3% chance of winning at Mount Infinity. The numbers don't lie, and they spelt disaster for that enemy Metal Greymon. We continued forward into the final room of the game, and we absolutely folded the Machinedramon into the dirt like a crushed can and promptly placed it in the recycling bin. And then the game was over. I stood together with Nelma and the Digimon we had helped save as they thanked us for our efforts in restoring their home. The digital beasts finished their shows of gratefulness, and then suddenly, out of nowhere, I freeze at the last line of dialogue in this entire game. I feel a profound lack of presence on my lap, and I'm forced to reckon with the truth. For a few minutes, I remember Nelma faded away again. For a few more minutes, I consider the game I just played and the adventure that I had been on together with her. I think about the places we didn't go and the Digimon that she could have evolved into. I know there are things that only occur after completing the game and that we could go and do them. I decide not to do any of them. I felt it appropriate that the game, for us, end right here. I decide that after I see the credits that I will never open this save file ever again, and that this was good enough. I think about the words again. How could a game with maybe the worst translation of all time bring me to real-life tears? I laugh about it for a moment. I can't help myself. I think about her tracing, double tracing, and triple tracing the room. I look back at the screen and I read the words one more time. Nelma, our adventure was grand. I progress the dialogue box, and my character teleports away. And then the game bugs and plays this screeching teleportation sound through the entire credits and the post-credits scene.
I'm home.
What was I talking about again? Oh, I was talking about how my best friend Nelma died. So why did I even think about that sound to begin with? The one with the birds chirping that led me to playing this video game. I spent some time considering this, and the answers became obvious to me after a while. I thought about the death of my grandparents, and how their passing hadn't affected me in the same way. In my mind, their deaths happened naturally, and they lived long and relatively healthy lives. When my grandma and grandpa died, they did so at the ripe old age of 89 and 92, respectively. There was no question as to why they passed, and thus I did not struggle with it. When Nelma passed, it was sudden, and my understanding of her age, it being 7, still felt like she had a whole life to live. Her passing felt unfair to her and to me. The cruelty of her sudden passing was only stymied by the fact that she did not struggle for years. Another aspect of this is that I have all of these holes in my life now. I'm made glaringly aware of them due to her absence. Small things that I find myself missing now. I miss the schedule we kept. I miss her waiting for me to carry her to bed each night, or how she would protest if I was up too late. I miss conversing with her. I know it's ridiculous, but if ever there was a person on this planet who understood me and who I understood without speaking a single word of the other's language, it was her. I miss her pouncing across the floor with her long, puffy fur swaying back and forth. I miss all the places I could expect her to be, and for a long time, I felt uncomfortable in my own home by her absence. I miss her following me while I paced the house.
I miss her
I miss
tiny
how
pigs.
she
I miss
watched
her
my
waiting
hands
for
when I
permission to
talked.
get in my
I
lap.
miss getting
cleaning
her
my
special
head.
holiday food. I miss how she'd lose it if I cracked open the can, even if it wasn't for her. I miss how close she would get to me in the morning and meow right in my face.
I miss playing with her.
I miss the way it felt to bury my face in her fur and listen to her breathe. I just miss her. I miss Nelma, and I wanted to spend a little bit more time with her. And even a completely fictional representation of my friend that I could take care of while I spent some time considering her eternal physical absence occurred to me as acceptable. During this time, a few more things occurred to me, and I'd like to share those with you. I spent some time thinking about objects and their owners. Like when you get an object in a game and it has someone else's name on it. I think about objects in my own life in this way. There are objects in my possession that uniquely belong to me. Simultaneously, there are items in my possession that still belong to someone else. I used to wear a cardigan to work because even though I live in a temperate climate, every single freak I've ever had the misfortune of working for has decided to make the inside of their building as miserable as the Connecticut suburb from whence they hailed. Every weekday evening, I would remove this cardigan upon entering my apartment and be greeted by Nelma, prancing down the staircase, shouting and telling me about her day. I used to think she was just excited because it meant it was time to eat. But there were plenty of times where I'd forgotten for a little bit to feed her and she was perfectly fine with spending time in my lap. Anyway, most days when I removed the cardigan, I left it on the couch. When she or I needed some time to ourselves, she would lay on the cardigan. Now I must be honest, she would probably lay on any object that she considered mine. But I noticed that she really did seem to like that cardigan quite a bit. Eventually, when I started working from home, I just left the cardigan in her favorite sunbathing spot. I still have this cardigan, even though it's missing all of her hair. It has ceased to be my cardigan. It's hers. She even did this with songs. There are several songs that I consider hers now. On March 11th, 2021, Nelma claimed one such song. She sat in her favorite spot, and I kept her company while waiting for Stephanie to arrive at my apartment. I took out my phone and was scrolling TikTok, and I came across a video featuring Claire de Lune recorded with an omnicord. I'm sure people who were on the platform at this time probably remember this rendition and have heard it dozens of times. I'll play the video in its entirety for you now. After I took this video, I watched it back, cried, and immediately set it to private. She looked at me sleepy-eyed, prepared to settle in for a nap, unknowing of how short that particular nap would be. Don't worry, she had plenty after this. I looked at her, and for just a moment, I saw a future tense, tired cat that had lived a whole and complete life. I kept this TikTok to myself until the very posting of this video. She claimed that song on that day, and with it, pressed upon me an urgency to spend more time with her, love her, take more photos and videos of her, under the consideration that one day these would be all I have left of her. I've struggled for several reasons with the writing of this video. Some reasons are obvious, some are private, but one particular reason has to do with tense. I labored to ensure I never use the term love in the past tense while discussing Nelma. When conversing with myself on the matter of her passing, sometimes I would say I loved her, but through all of this, I've come to an understanding about love, and this is the other thing I'd like to share with you. I realized the agony that comes from losing someone you love is the recognition of the cognitive dissonance between the absence of their being and the constant of your love for them. That if you love someone for the entirety of their lifetime, that love will forever be experienced by you in the present tense. Nelma died on November 30th, 2023. She departed while handing to me the monumentally hilarious gift of outliving Henry Kissinger by exactly 1 full day. I struggled a lot in the immediate aftermath of her passing, which wasn't surprising, but the variety of the whiplashes were. At first, I thought perhaps I shouldn't have changed her diet when she started losing weight. She had been slowly but steadily losing weight over the past 2 years. Considering my absolute unwavering consistency with her diet, this was irregular. I thought, well, maybe the wet food wasn't enough per serving. And the thing is I know I looked it up. I knew it was 1 ounce more than what she needed per serving every day. Then I thought, why didn't I just sell everything I own and do whatever I could to keep her alive? What do I need a copy of Thousand Arms for the PlayStation 1 for when I could have my little buddy? But again, I knew the truth. The truth was her kidneys were expanding, and eventually they would fail. The failure of which would cause her an agony that I would not wish on my worst enemy, and I mean that with every ounce of sincerity I can possibly muster. I tried to figure out what mistakes I could have possibly made or what I could have done to extend her life. But for the last time, I reckoned with the truth, that I had done exactly everything I could do for her, and I had given her what every good cat deserves. A person who feeds them, houses them, and loves them. 7 years seems like such a short time for a cat, but again, in truth, I never knew Nelma's real age. She was presumed to be 2 years old when I got her, but she possessed no microchip at the time, so there was never an exact answer on the matter of her age. Until I had seen the x-rays that revealed her mounting kidney issues, I didn't even know of the 2 BBs some non-digital monster put in her. I think about the thoughtless cruelty someone would have to possess to do this to someone who could inspire this many words of adoration. I hope for that particular monster a love as profound as the one I now possess. And it is in the completion of this knowing that Nelma imparts upon me her final gift. It is something that has plagued me long before she was born, and only through her passing have I come to its understanding. In the years before I knew Nelma, I feared leaving this world without making some sort of mark. Despite my affinity for object collecting, I don't want my passing to simply be a redistribution of some objects that someone else would consider Onis. And I don't think this struggle is unique either. People struggle with this feeling, and it is made evident by gestures we express to one another. We leave recipes behind for family and friends when we visit the cookout. We carve our names into trees and wooden structures to let the next person know someone had been here. I don't think any of this is profound, by the way. But the thing that really got me, and maybe this speaks to my own ignorance, is that I had never really considered any of these things as an expression of that desire to leave something behind once you're gone. With Nelma's death, I no longer struggle with this notion of what to leave behind. The gift she gave is a simple one, fitting of a cat. The understanding that love is in fact the thing we leave behind when we're gone. When passed to you, it carries with it their name, their life, or at least what you know of it and what parts of it they were willing to share with you. This experience folds in on you if you allow it, and you pass it along to someone else. And at some point, after they're gone, and you're gone, and the person you gave it to is gone, this love becomes a specter. Possessing no name, hardly a face, it loses all description and becomes raw, unfiltered emotion. Without recognition of your name, a truth remains that it is yours, and you did give it away, and it persists without you. It left you, and it left the person you left it to, but it's still yours. I've let go of the fear that what I leave behind will not possess my name, and I share my love with you. I love you. I love Stephanie. I love her cat Couscous. And I love Nelma. All of you. Present tense. Thank you.
Why don't you ever want to play? I'm tired of this piece of string. You sleep as much as I do now. And you don't eat much of anything. I don't know who you're talking to. Made a search through every room, but all I found was dust that moved. Shadows, the afternoon. And listen, about those bitter songs you sing, they're not helping anything. That won't make you strong. So we should open up the house. Invite the tabby 2 doors down. You could ask your sister if she doesn't bring the basset hound. Ask the things you shouldn't miss. Tape hiss and the modern man. Cold War and card catalogs. To come join us if they can. For girly drinks and parlor games, we'll pass around the easy lie. I've absolutely no regrets. Later, maybe, you could try to let your losses dangle off the sharp edge of a century. We'll talk about the weather, or how the weather used to be. And I'll cater with all the birds that I can kill. Let their tiny feathers fill disappointment. I'll lie down and lick the sorrow from your skin. Scratch the tear and begin to believe you're strong. All you ever want to do is drink and watch TV. Frankly, that thing doesn't really interest me. I swear I'm gonna bite you hard and taste your tinny blood if you don't stop the self-defeating lies you've been repeating since the day you brought me home. I know you're strong.
Mario.